Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday afternoon, President Trump scored an absolutely massive win in the U.S. Supreme Court, and I'll tell you what, right now, the radical progressives are losing their minds. You see, just yesterday afternoon, the Supreme Court ruled in an 8-1 decision that President Trump does, in fact, have the executive authority to revoke the temporary protected status, the TPS, that former President Joe Biden had granted to roughly 350,000 Venezuelan illegal aliens. As many of you know, temporary protected status, or TPS, was a scheme that allowed these illegal aliens to stay in our country without fear of deportation, a reckless move that fueled chaos and crime across the United States. So in truth, this ruling is a monumental win for President Trump, empowering him to immediately apprehend and deport nearly 350,000 Venezuelans that former President Joe Biden shielded with all of his open border nonsense. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, if this was an 8-1 ruling in the Supreme Court, who was the one Supreme Court justice that voted against President Trump? Well, this should come as a surprise to absolutely no one, but it was the one and only infamous Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. The very same Justice Jackson who is perhaps best known for not knowing what a woman is, jabbering over 2 times more than any other justice on the Supreme Court, and only getting picked by Joe Biden because she was a woman of color. Hey, those were his words, not mine. But so what this Supreme Court ruling does is empower President Trump to revoke the temporary protected status for nearly 350,000 illegal immigrant Venezuelans, enabling their immediate apprehension and deportation. As many of you know, in 2021, one of the first things he did when he stepped into the White House, President Joe Biden gave approximately 350,000 Venezuelan illegal aliens temporary protected status, allowing them to exist in our country without fear of deportation, which pretty much unleashed total chaos into the streets of America. Then, check this out. Just days before leaving office in January of 2025, Joe Biden offered another 600,000 Venezuelan illegal aliens temporary protected status, but luckily, President Trump was able to immediately revoke that order when he stepped back into the White House. So very clearly, the long-term objective of the radical progressives was to facilitate the entrance of as many illegal aliens as possible into the United States by whatever means necessary. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank God that President Trump is back in the White House. Now, folks, we have a lot more to talk about here, but before we do, I want to quickly say that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out. The radical progressives opened up our southern border by choosing not to enforce our pre-existing federal immigration laws. They created a smartphone app which allowed every single illegal alien to claim that they were a refugee. They almost entirely shut down ICE, bringing deportations to a complete and total standstill, and they offered hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens temporary protected status. In total, their goal of flooding America with as many illegal aliens as possible resulted in over 20 million illegal aliens making their way into the United States of America. And as you all know, in every single location in the United States that Joe Biden's protected Venezuelan immigrants have settled, there have been absolutely catastrophic consequences. Fentanyl floods into the neighborhoods, crime and burglary goes through the roof, and Tren de Aragua gang cells start popping up all over the place. So luckily, Joe Biden's reckless temporary protected status program for all of these illegal aliens, which did nothing but shield all of them from federal immigration officers and endanger American communities, has now officially been overturned. Ultimately, President Trump's victory in the Supreme Court here restores executive authority over immigration policy, rejecting judicial overreach by lower federal courts that attempted to block his deportation efforts. And I'll tell you what, the deportation of these temporarily protected Venezuelans perfectly aligns with President Trump's America First principles, prioritizing the safety and prosperity of United States citizens instead of foreign illegal alien invaders, which is exactly what the Democrats tried to do. Because here's the truth, here's what the left-wing media won't tell you guys. violent terrorist gang organizations like Tren de Aragua aggressively exploited Biden's temporary protected status policies, so now Trump can revoke their protected status and completely dismantle their presence throughout the United States. The reality is, Joe Biden's open border policies did absolutely nothing other than invite chaos into the country, with over 20 million illegal aliens entering the United States during his very short 4-year-long presidency, putting an insurmountable amount of strain on American communities and American taxpayers. So, really, this is just yet another example of President Trump's resolve to fulfill the promises that he made on the campaign trail, in this case, apprehending and deporting every single illegal immigrant, alien, gang member, terrorist that is inside of our country. That being said, this is also yet another example of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's radically progressive partisan problems. Time and time again, she finds herself being in the minority end of numerous 8-1 Supreme Court rulings, and at this point, we must collectively acknowledge that a far-left radical like her has absolutely no place on the Supreme Court, and she absolutely cannot be trusted to interpret the U.S. Constitution. Luckily, she didn't get her way this time, but let the record show, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wants you to be forced to live next to a bunch of Tren de Aragua gang members. There's really no other way to look at this. However, we do need to count our blessings, and this is undeniably a massive win for President Trump, but more importantly, for the American people. One by one, day by day, all of these illegal immigrant invaders are being apprehended, detained, and deported back to wherever they came from, and the entire radically progressive apparatus is beginning to crumble. The Democrats have been intentionally importing illegal aliens for years now, trying to replace all of us hardworking Americans, but now their anti-American agenda is getting exposed and destroyed. They realized that they had lost the support of the American people, so their goal was to just replace the American people. But we have had enough, and now that President Trump is back in office, the jig is up. Because here's the truth, folks. This is what it looks like to finally put America first. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.